What's up, everybody? My name's Kyle. I make game dev videos twice per week, so give me a subscribe if you want to get more. For today's topic, we're going to talk about game engines, specifically which game engines could work for you making your first game. The engine you use and the type of game you make are related to each other. Not every engine is good at every kind of game, and I'll talk about that a little as we go on. Another thing to keep in mind is that for the most part, I'm talking about Steam games because that's what I make. For things like mobile or web, you may need to make a different choice. I'll try to mention a couple of considerations to keep in mind throughout the video. So let's get started here. First up, engine number one, Unity. Unity is a really popular game engine. There's a lot of good content on YouTube about it, and it's really where a lot of people start their game dev journey. It was the first game engine that I used. Used Unity for about 3 years, mostly making prototypes, learning about game dev, did a game jam or two with Unity, and eventually I decided to not use it. Unity uses the C# language for its programming. It's a little easier to use C# than it is other languages like C++. There is also a visual scripting component in Unity, but personally I didn't find it very full-featured. It didn't seem very useful to me, so I just used code the whole time. Programming model for Unity is relatively simple. There's only a couple types of primitive objects you need to deal with, and you are going to be writing code if you use Unity. There's very little way around that. In terms of graphics and kind of what you get out of the box with Unity, it can look nice, but in 2024, it's a little dated. You have to do a little bit more work to get something that looks really, really great. It does do 2D games really well. And that's where I see so many people use Unity today, is to make 2D games. The other thing, it does have web builds for like WebGL to run in the browser, as well as mobile. It does those pretty easily. The asset store for Unity has been one of their big sells, and it has been for years. It is huge. There's tons of assets on there, and it can be kind of hard to find one that really fits the vibe that you want. I've had a little bit of trouble with quality with Unity assets, and unfortunately the refund process is just hellaciously slow. It took 4 months. So if you're buying assets and you may want a refund, keep that in mind. Last thing I'll say about it is about licensing. Unity's licensing in 2024 is complex. It has a lot of different facets that go into how much you pay and if you pay. But as a general rule of thumb, if you're a company and you make more than $250K in revenue funding from any source, you are going to owe Unity money. Exact details of that, I'll try to put a link down in the description below to the pricing page for Unity because it's fairly complex. It'd be an entire video of itself. Engine number two, Unreal Engine. I use Unreal, and I have for about 1.5 years now. I really like it personally, keep that in mind, so this will be a little bit of a biased take. The programming language for Unreal is C++. If you really don't want to write code, you don't have to, because there's a thing called Blueprint in Unreal. It's super powerful. You can do a ton of stuff with it. You actually don't have to write a line of code if you don't want to make a commercial game. My game, Trace Hunters, is about 90% Blueprint code, and I've written code for 20 years. I just preferred the Blueprint workflow. It was a lot cleaner integration, a lot tighter feedback loop. Unreal Engine is very powerful, and out of the box, it's very pretty. So you get some really awesome visuals just by default. Unreal is opinionated about workflows and has specific workflow tools for each of the different things. So you have materials tools, landscape tools, modeling tools, and a lot of the even 3D modeling you can do in Engine pretty easily. And the opinions about it generally make sense. They're generally what you want, and that's something that I really liked about the engine. Out of the box, it has a good default state. For marketplace assets, you have the Unreal Marketplace. There's a lot of assets on there. You can get all kinds of stuff, very similar to the Unity asset store. Unreal has a bunch of different templates that either Epic Games has made or that other people have made on the Unreal Marketplace, and those can be a really good starting point for your game. They do tend to skew a bit more toward the realistic side than the low poly or 2D side. Unreal itself, I would really not recommend it for 2D. It has a paper 2D thing that you can use, but I think it really shines best when you're making 3D games. Unreal doesn't have engine fees. Instead, you pay royalties. But the good thing about that is the royalties are 5%, and you don't owe them royalties until your game makes more than $1 million. Not your company, your game. Very few of us indies are going to do that. If you do, that's really awesome. Let me know about it. Congrats. For the most part, you can, as an indie, especially as a solo dev or a small studio, you're very unlikely to pay Epic royalties on your game. Okay, engine number 3 that we're going to cover, Godot. Godot is open source engine. It has been around for a little bit, but it recently became much more popular after Unity's pricing debacle back in 2023, almost a year ago now. The Godot engine really saw a spike in usage at that time for people jumping ship, and they want something that's open source that they don't have to worry about problems of people changing their pricing model. Godot's programming language is GD script. It's Python based, which for me, I think that's cool because I like Python. I think it's aesthetically pleasing. I use it for other things. Since version 4.2, you can use C# with with Godot, and you can also extend Godot to use other languages like C++. I have seen a lot more 2D games in Godot than 3D games. I've never made one myself with Godot. It's on my list to try at some point. I think it could be interesting. There are some newer 3D games coming up, so keep that in mind when you're looking for learning content about Godot. It may be a little harder to find. At least from my look at it so far and talking to other devs who use Godot, it seems like you have a lot more of a do-it-yourself mindset when you're going with that engine. It's still growing, it's still changing, so it's some of that stuff that's built into other engines like Unreal is not quite there yet. Maybe the biggest point that people like about Godot is that it's free to use. It's open source, it uses the MIT license, so that means you can take the code, you can change it, you can pretty much do whatever you want with it and you don't have to pay for it. It's also really difficult to change that as an MIT licensed open source project. You get that peace of mind that the licensing model isn't going to change out from under you. Those are the 3 engines I'm going to cover today. They're the 3 main engines that I see people use for game dev, especially for Steam. There are a ton of other game engines. Some of them are very special purpose. Maybe at some point in time I'll make a video about them too. What are my recommendations for you as a solo dev or you as a new small team? My number 1 recommendation for most styles of game is Unreal Engine. Unreal is great. Even if you don't know how to code, you can totally use it. It's not an issue. Number 2 recommendation on that most likely is Godot. Most likely, I feel like in 2024, Godot is going to be a better choice than Unity. And then number 3 on that list, Unity. Personally, I don't think it's really kept up as well as Unreal or Godot. I wouldn't recommend it to most people in 2024. Maybe if you're making a 2D game, or maybe you're making a 2D platformer, which if you want to make sales, you shouldn't do anyway. You could use Unity for that. That's my take for game engines. If you have a different opinion, leave it in the comments below. Please like and subscribe on the video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.